The conference center in downtown Chicago was spotless, modern, and cold in that way upscale places often are. Glass walls, brushed steel fixtures, the faint scent of lemon polish. Tobias Wade stepped through the front doors at 7:42 a.m., well before the start of the morning keynote. He wore black slacks, a soft navy cardigan, and old Adidas sneakers. No lanyard, no briefcase, just a thin notebook tucked under one arm. He paused just inside the lobby, taking in the space. His eyes scanned the directory, then the escalator leading up to the second floor. Most of the staff hadn't arrived yet. A few early attendees lingered near the coffee stand. From the far side of the lobby, a man in a gray uniform with a security badge spotted him. His name tag read V. Rourke. The guard's eyes narrowed slightly as he changed course, heading directly for Tobias. Tobias adjusted the strap of his watch and began walking toward the escalator. "Hey!" Rourke called out. "Sir? Excuse me." Tobias stopped. Rourke approached quickly, planting himself a little too close. "Can I help you with something?" Rourke asked, looking him up and down. "Are you here for the cleaning staff?" Tobias blinked once. "No," he said, calm, even. Rourke frowned. "Then you're not supposed to be in this area yet. Events upstairs don't begin until 8:30. This level is reserved for registered conference guests." Tobias nodded slowly, not moving. "I'm aware," he said. "I'm heading upstairs." Rourke's hand hovered near his belt, not threatening, but not relaxed either. "You don't have a badge." "I'll get it upstairs," Tobias replied. The guard's voice hardened just slightly. "You'll need to wait down here until someone from the registration desk can verify you." Tobias didn't move. The pause between them stretched. He looked past Rourke, to the wide glass railing that overlooked the upper level. His voice remained level. "Are you asking everyone that? Or just me?" Rourke blinked, caught off guard by the question. "That's where we begin." Rourke didn't answer the question. He shifted slightly, posture stiffening. His voice tried for neutral but landed closer to defensive. "I'm just following procedure. If you don't have your credentials displayed, you can't go upstairs. That applies to everyone." Tobias looked past him again to the escalator, where two white men in khakis and fleece vests were already heading up, coffee cups in hand. Neither wore visible lanyards. Neither had been stopped. Rourke didn't turn to look. He didn't need to. Tobias stepped slightly to the side. "You said everyone. So, just curious. Did you stop them too?" The guard didn't respond. He pressed his lips together, watching Tobias with the kind of scrutiny that made it clear this had nothing to do with policy. "Not really." "You'll need to stay here," Rourke repeated, voice firmer now. "I can call someone to confirm your registration." Tobias nodded slowly, as if considering that. "Sure," he said. "Go ahead." The words were calm, but his gaze didn't waver. It was the kind of look that held something back. Not anger, not resistance, just patience. The kind you learn when you've been here before. Rourke hesitated, clearly not expecting compliance. He turned, walked a few paces to the desk, and picked up the phone. Tobias waited, motionless, near the base of the escalator. The notebook under his arm hadn't shifted once. Across the room, a woman in a navy blazer who'd just come through the front doors slowed as she took in the scene. Her conference badge read, Operations Manager, Event Staff. She tilted her head slightly, watching. Tobias didn't look at her. He didn't look at anyone. Rourke spoke quietly into the phone. The woman began walking toward them. Tobias turned just slightly, enough to see her coming, but not enough to invite the moment. He already knew what was about to happen, and so did she. The woman reached them just as Rourke hung up the phone. She was brisk, efficient, and not in the mood for confusion. Her eyes went to Tobias, then to the guard. "Is there a problem here?" she asked, voice calm but clipped. Rourke straightened slightly. "This gentleman doesn't have a badge and was attempting to access the second floor. I was confirming his registration." The woman didn't look at Rourke. Her attention stayed on Tobias now. A half beat passed. Then she blinked. "Oh," she said softly. "You're." Tobias gave her a small nod. Nothing more. Her face shifted, quickly, something between embarrassment and alarm. She turned back to Rourke. "He doesn't need confirmation. He's cleared." Rourke's brows drew in. "But he's the keynote speaker," she said louder now. "Dr. Tobias Wade, the person opening the conference." Silence. Rourke froze. The name landed hard. He looked at Tobias again, seeing him for the first time. The calm, the clothes, the confidence that hadn't flinched under pressure. And now the reality. Rourke started, then stopped. His voice had dropped half an octave. I wasn't aware. Tobias didn't answer. The woman stepped aside, gesturing toward the escalator. We've been expecting you, Dr. Wade. Your badge and materials are waiting upstairs. Tobias nodded once. Thank you. He turned and began walking toward the escalator, his stride unhurried, his back straight. Rourke stood where he was, still holding the edge of the desk, the quiet wrapping around him like heat. 1 moment ago he was the authority. Now he wasn't sure what he was. Tobias reached the escalator, but the woman motioned toward the elevator tucked discreetly behind a decorative panel. Private access, she said. You won't have to deal with the crowd. He nodded and they stepped inside together. The doors closed with a soft hiss. Silence filled the elevator. She glanced sideways. I'm sorry that happened. Tobias didn't respond right away. His gaze was fixed ahead on the digital floor indicator. I'm used to it, he said finally. Quiet. Matter of fact. That made her flinch a little more than anything else had. The way he said it. Like he was describing traffic. We trained the staff to recognize speakers, she offered, her tone laced with something she hadn't expected to feel that morning. Shame. He wasn't looking for someone important, Tobias said. He was looking for someone to control. The elevator dinged. 2nd floor. The doors opened. I'll have a word with him, she added quickly. Tobias stepped out, pausing just long enough to reply without turning around. Don't talk to him because I'm someone. Talk to him because I could have been anyone. And then he was gone, disappearing into the wide, carpeted hallway, leaving her standing alone in the elevator, her reflection staring back at her in the mirrored wall. The conference prep area was quiet. A few techs adjusted lighting. A man in a headset tested the microphone at the podium. The main ballroom stretched wide and professional, rows of chairs, a stage, 3 large projection screens displaying the conference logo, Future Forward, Leadership in Crisis. Tobias entered unnoticed at first. He found his name printed on a folder at the front table, Dr. Tobias Wade, opening keynote. Inside were the schedule, the bio he hadn't written, and a bottled water. A woman with a headset spotted him. Oh, Dr. Wade? You're early. He nodded. You're welcome to use the green room or stay here. We're still setting up, but we'll be ready in 20. I'll stay. She gave a polite smile, then darted back toward the tech crew. Tobias stood near the podium for a moment, looking out at the empty chairs. His fingers tapped the folder once, then stopped. Behind him, footsteps. Not hurried, but unsure. He didn't turn around. Dr. Wade? The voice was lower. Hesitant. He turned. Rourke stood just outside the ballroom, one hand gripping the door frame. He looked smaller here. More human. Without the uniform's posture or the desk's safety. I didn't know it was you, he said. Tobias's expression didn't change. That's the point. The guard nodded slowly, swallowing whatever defense he might have had earlier. You're right. And then he added something unexpected. I've got a daughter. 17. She wants to go into law. Tobias waited. I hope when she gets there, people don't look at her and assume what I did. That landed. Harder than the earlier tension. Because this wasn't an apology. It was reflection. You still have time to teach her differently, Tobias said. Then he turned back to the stage. Rourke didn't move. Didn't argue. He just stood there, holding on to that moment like it might change him. By 8:27 a.m., the ballroom was almost full. Badges flipped on lanyards. Coffee cups. Whispered introductions. People scanning the schedule and marking panels they'd never attend. The front rows were reserved executives, board members, organizers. Most hadn't read the bios beyond the bolded titles. One of them leaned over to another. You hear anything about the opening speaker? Nope. Thought it was that professor from Berkeley. Wade. Yeah. But I figured honestly thought he'd be older. They glanced at the stage where Tobias now stood quietly off to the side, waiting. No slides. No flashy opening. Just him. A woman in a tailored suit whispered to her assistant, where's his team? Doesn't he have people? Her assistant shrugged. Near the back, someone asked if there would be handouts. Another man chuckled. You mean the guy in the cardigan? Doubt it. Tobias heard none of this. But he knew. He knew how people filled in silence. How they filled it with assumptions. With doubt. With the question that always hovered, unspoken but sharp. Does he belong here? And still, he waited. At 8:30 on the dot, the house lights dimmed slightly. The microphone clicked on. The moderator, a polished man in a blazer with a practiced smile, stepped up. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the opening keynote of this year's Future Forward Conference. We're honored to begin with a speaker who challenges not just ideas, but assumptions. He turned, gesturing. Please welcome Dr. Tobias Wade. A smattering of applause. Courteous, uncertain. Tobias stepped forward. The light shifted, and suddenly, The man who had been invisible an hour ago was standing center stage, framed by silence. Tobias adjusted the mic. No slides behind him. No notes. Just the steady hush of a crowd that didn't know what to expect. He looked out at them. Not smiling. Not performing. Just there. "Before we begin," he said, "let's talk about doors." A few brows lifted. "Not the ones you walk through," he continued. "The ones people hold closed." Now they were listening. "This morning, I walked through yours. No badge. No suit. No entourage. Just me. And I was stopped." He didn't point fingers. He didn't raise his voice. "I was told I didn't belong. That I needed to be verified. That I must have been with the cleaning staff." A ripple of discomfort moved through the audience. Shifting in seats. Throats clearing. And when it became clear who I was, everything changed. Suddenly, I wasn't a question anymore. I was someone. Someone with a title. He paused. "I'm not here to talk about that moment. I'm here to talk about what made it possible. What allows someone to look at another person and see a role, not a human." Silence. Not defensive. Just stunned. We are professionals. Leaders. Innovators. And yet many of us still fail the first test of leadership, seeing. Someone in the second row put their coffee down. Another leaned forward. Tobias looked across the crowd, not for validation, but to meet eyes. "This isn't about me," he said. "It's about how quickly we decide who matters." And that's when the room started to shift. Not loudly, not with applause, but with the quiet kind of attention that means people aren't just hearing. They're starting to feel it. Tobias let the silence stretch. He wasn't in a rush. He knew real impact didn't come from how fast you talked. It came from what you left behind. He walked slowly across the stage. "I've spent years studying crisis leadership," he said. "And here's something we don't like to admit. Crisis doesn't reveal character. It reveals habit." He paused, then looked at a woman in the front row. "Some people greet a stranger with welcome. Others with suspicion. Not because of who that person is, but because of who they've trained themselves to expect." No one moved. Even the note-takers had stopped writing. "You can't fix what you don't acknowledge," Tobias said. "And you can't lead if you're still governed by silent bias. If the first thing you assess is appearance, not intent, then you're not leading. You're sorting." A murmur near the back. The kind that comes when discomfort meets recognition. "And this morning, someone sorted me." He didn't name the guard. He didn't need to. But what if I wasn't the speaker? What if I was a guest? Or a student? Or someone without a title to rescue them from dismissal? A long pause. "I don't need your sympathy," he said. "I need your attention." And he had it now. Completely. Because this wasn't a keynote anymore. It was a reckoning. Tobias stopped near the edge of the stage, closer to the audience now. He didn't raise his voice. "I'm not the first person that's happened to," he said. "And I won't be the last. But if you're here, sitting in this room, attending a conference on leadership, then you've already accepted a responsibility." He scanned the crowd. To see what others ignore. To step in when others stay silent. He let that sink in. "Some of you are shifting in your seats. That's good. That means this isn't just theory anymore." A few people looked down. Not ashamed. Just found out. "You didn't stop me at the door," he said. "But maybe you've stopped someone. With a glance. A decision. Policy. Maybe you didn't say anything when someone else did it." He looked up at the balcony, where junior staff and interns were seated. "They remember. The people you overlook, they remember." There it was again. That quiet stillness that takes over a room when it realizes it's not watching a story. It's part of one. "I'm not here to lecture you," Tobias said. "I'm here to remind you that the people you don't think matter are often the ones shaping what matters most." Someone near the back folded their arms tighter. Another uncrossed theirs. Everyone was listening now, because suddenly this wasn't about a man on a stage. It was about everyone in the room. Tobias walked back to center stage. Still calm. Still controlled. But every word now had weight behind it. "I didn't introduce myself this morning because I wanted to be treated like anyone else," he said. "And I was." He let that hang. "Exactly like anyone else who walks in without a title. Without the right clothes. Without a look you expect." People shifted again. The woman from earlier, the one who asked where his team was, lowered her eyes. Tobias glanced toward the back of the room. "I'm not angry, but I am clear." He reached into the folder on the podium, pulled out nothing more than a slip of paper. Later today, I'll be meeting with several of the conference board members. I sit on 3 of their advisory panels. Another pause. And I consult for 2 of the largest leadership institutes in this room. Now they understood. He hadn't come to impress them. He'd come to remind them what real influence looks like. Unannounced, unassuming, unmistakable once revealed. I've made decisions that shape your work, he said, his tone quiet. Long before you ever saw my face. And in that moment, the air changed. Not because he'd claimed power, but because he'd revealed where it had always been. The room didn't applaud. Not yet. They just sat with it. The realization of who he was and what they hadn't seen settled over them like fog. Near the front, the moderator shifted in his chair. His smile was gone now, replaced by something else. Awareness. Maybe regret. A man in a navy blazer whispered to the woman next to him he could have started with that with the credentials. She didn't respond. Because that was the point. Tobias didn't need to prove he belonged. They needed to ask why they assumed he didn't. Up in the balcony, a young black intern leaned forward in her seat, her eyes locked on the stage. No note-taking. No blinking. Just watching. The security guard, Rourke, stood near the door in the back. Still. Listening. He hadn't left. Tobias hadn't humiliated him. He'd done something worse. He'd let him see himself. The unfiltered version. And the room, this polished, well-dressed, highly credentialed room, had become a mirror. No one was sure what to do with that. Yet, Tobias stepped back from the podium. His tone didn't change. No dramatic pause. No swelling conclusion. Just clarity. This morning was never about one guard or one moment, he said. It was about what we reveal when we're not being watched. He let that land. When there's no audience, no name tags, no incentive to be decent, what do we default to? He looked out at them one last time. Whatever that is, that's who we really are. He didn't thank the audience. He didn't invite questions. He simply nodded once, stepped down from the stage, and walked toward the side exit. Not rushed. Not triumphant. Just steady. Leaving them with a question most wouldn't forget. Who were they before they knew his name? And who would they be now? He left the room before the applause started. Not that it was loud. It was hesitant, uneven, starting in one corner, then spreading as people realized silence was no longer safe. A few stood. Most didn't. In the front row, the executive who had questioned his credentials earlier sat rigid, hands clasped tight in her lap. She didn't look up. She just breathed. Upstairs, in the tech booth, the operator who'd barely acknowledged Tobias during mic check turned to the assistant beside him. Did you know? The assistant shook his head. In the hallway outside, a young woman leaned against the wall, phone still in hand. She hadn't recorded the speech, but she wasn't going to forget it. Near the registration desk, Rourke stood alone, still in uniform. He hadn't been fired. No one had called him out publicly. And yet, he'd never felt more visible. He glanced at the elevators, considered walking up to the 2nd floor, then didn't, because this wasn't about being seen anymore. It was about seeing. And now he saw himself differently. Tobias had done that. Without punishment. Without anger. Without raising his voice. Back inside the ballroom, the energy had shifted. Workshops were scheduled to begin in 15 minutes, but no one moved. The panelists at table 3 had stopped reviewing their talking points. The coffee station sat untouched. Laptops stayed closed. Instead, people whispered. Not about his resume. Not about his credentials. About themselves. I think I've done that, one man said quietly to his colleague. Assumed. His colleague didn't answer. Just nodded. At the back, a marketing director pulled out her phone and deleted a tweet draft she'd written during the first 5 minutes of Tobias's talk. It had said something smug. Something she didn't believe anymore. In the 2nd row, the woman who had asked where his team was leaned over to her assistant. Make a note, she said. We need to revisit our onboarding training. But it wasn't just a task. Her voice had changed. Not performative. Not managerial. Personal. Near the doors, someone who hadn't spoken all morning finally did. I think I just watched the most important presentation of the week, he said. No one disagreed. Because no one could. Tobias didn't return to the ballroom. He walked through the service hallway past stacked chairs and half-empty crates of bottled water. No one followed him. No spotlight. No fanfare. At the end of the hall, a volunteer stood by the staff elevator, startled to see him. Dr. Wade, she asked, unsure. He nodded once. Just heading out. She smiled nervously. Everyone's still inside. I think you shook them a little. He didn't answer. Just pressed the elevator button. The doors opened. Before stepping in, he turned to her. Don't let them forget what it felt like, he said quietly. She blinked. What felt like? Being wrong, he said. But staying quiet enough to hear why. And then he was gone. Back in the ballroom, the next panel began. Microphones turned on. People shifted forward in their seats. But the room was different now. Not because of what had been said, but because of what had been revealed. No one spoke about the guard again. No one needed to. Because everyone had seen him in someone else. And for the first time, they were seeing themselves too. That was Tobias Wade's real keynote. Not a speech, a mirror.